Hello, Anthony Fasano here from Pass the PE Exam. In this video, I'm going to talk with Megan Nugent, engineer in training, a project engineer for geotechnical services at Colliers Engineering Design. Megan has experienced the unique challenges of both the written and CBT, or computer-based testing, exam formats. Megan will share her firsthand insights and experiences, discussing topics such as balancing graduate studies and exam preparation, the transition from the written to CBT format, and the impact of field experience on exam performance. This Pass the PE Exam video is brought to you by PPI, a leader in engineering exam prep for the FE and PE exams since 1975. PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the PE exam the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. When you take a live online course, PPI guarantees you will pass, or you can take the on-demand course for free. With study guides, practice exams, and more, the PPI Learning Hub offers digital practice and review that you can take with you anywhere you have a device so that you can prepare during the times most convenient for you. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for PE exam prep. Let's dive in. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Megan Nugent is an EIT, a project engineer for geotechnical services at Colliers Engineering Design. And Megan, welcome to Pass the PE Exam.
Thanks for having me.
So, Megan, let's start off. Maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what it is you do as an engineer on a daily basis.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, I am a project engineer at Colliers Engineering Design in Homedale, New Jersey. My day-to-day tasks as a project engineer are, some office tasks such as writing foundation and soils reports, stormwater reports, and things like that. I spend a lot of time in the field, and I still do. On geotech projects, test borings and test pits, as well as construction projects. I'm currently a part-time graduate student at Rutgers University. That takes up a lot of my time too. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. So I guess, first of all, tell us where you're at in the process of, going for your PE license. Just give us a little idea of where you're at.
Sure. So I passed the exam in May of 2023. I had taken the EIT exam just after I graduated TCNJ in 2018. So I have just about 5 years experience. I sat for the exam once in October of 2021 and didn't pass. And then I took it again when it was CBT in May, passed it then. And then right now I'm in the application process. I have all my references and things, writing all those recommendations for me. And then it's just, a little more paperwork to get through.
That's great. And we actually, for those of you out there kind of wondering a little bit about that application process, we did a separate video on that. So after you pass the PE exam, they don't hand you your license. There's still some stuff that you have to go through, paperwork, etc. Depending on the state you're in, may vary, but there are some things you have to do to continue on and actually get the license. So, Megan, let's start. I'd like you to talk about your experience taking that last kind of written exam back in October 2021 and kind of not passing it. Maybe talk a little bit about, you had weekend classes. Just talk about your approach and what worked, what didn't, type of things for that first run.
Sure. Yeah. So I think there were about 3 exams after they had changed the rules, or at least the rules in New Jersey, where you could sit for the exam before you had 4 years of engineering experience. So it was kind of like all my friends were doing it, so I tried to do it too. And I signed up for a review class that was on the weekends while I was also on weeknights going to graduate school, and it just kind of turned out to be way too much for me to handle at one time. Only being like pretty beginning at my job and things like that. So it was just a little bit too much of a lift, I think. And also I didn't have as much experience in my graduate courses that ended up helping me when I retook it, a few years later, also with more work experience.
So talk a little bit about that, because I think basically, and again, this is really good advice for those of you out there. I know Matt Douglas at EMI was going through his FE exam process, and he was in the same boat. It was just too overloaded and ended up having to kind of postpone the exam. And I think it's something that we don't think about, because obviously everyone wants to get their license, right? As soon as we can, we want to kind of like sprint and try to get it. And listen, we're all for it. I mean, that's why we run this channel. But at the same time, you definitely have to balance all the different kind of life responsibilities, work responsibilities that you have going on. And so, talk a little bit about the idea of kind of balancing your graduate course, the exam prep, and, how you kind of ultimately managed to do it leading up to the computer-based test that you took.
Sure. Yeah. So the way that the review course that I took, you could have either weekend options where you're sitting there for 8 hours all day Saturday and all day Sunday, or there were weeknight options. So it was like 3 to 3.5 hours Monday through Thursday. The way I did it the first time when I didn't pass was that I did the weekend classes because I had graduate school on the weeknights. But that kind of left me no time to study outside of my review course, which wasn't enough studying to begin with. So when I decided to re-sign up, I made sure that I took off a semester of graduate school just so I could do the weeknight classes. And although that was exhausting for sure, I took Fridays off from studying, and then I was more refreshed, and I got to review the materials that I learned in class on Saturday and Sunday, independent study. And before I got too behind in the review class, I could ask questions and things like that. So I thought that was the most beneficial way for me, at least studying, is just because when I was taking the weekend courses, I couldn't get it after work. I wouldn't study after work. But
yeah. And I think really, quite frankly, that's a good recipe for anything in your career or life, right? If you try something and it doesn't work out, right, try to make the best changes for you to get a different result, which is exactly what Megan did, right? She took at that time it was a written test. She took it. She had the graduate course going on. She had work going on. And it was just too much. So she was able to kind of step back and say, listen, if I just cut one semester out for, take a break off from that semester, take courses, switch when I'm doing my courses, obviously it yielded a different result. So that being said, Megan, let's talk a little bit about, from the time you took the first pass at the exam to the second pass, it had switched from the written exam to the computer-based exam, which of course everyone's taking now. So talk a little bit about how maybe you adapted your study approach to accommodate this newer format. And how was it different? Because everyone's kind of has to prep for this CBT one now.
Sure. Yeah. Because when it was written, you could bring all your materials in. So, people, they always joke, bring suitcases and all that stuff. And I mean, it was true. There were people in my exam with different stuff. I had a crate, which is usually enough for geotechs, is what I've heard. So I had all the, my books from college. I had the PE review class books. I brought those with me. And I think I relied too heavily on thinking that there would be an example problem similar, and really made the mistake of thinking I'd have the time to go through all of that. So in studying for the CBT exam, it was just a totally different approach, because they give you this great NCES, this great study manual, and it's not a study manual, like a reference manual, and it's very lengthy, but the more you get used to it, you kind of know where everything is, and it's super easy to navigate. And I really used that, at least for the morning, and even in the afternoon. That was what I primarily used to study, and I, got to know that back and forth. And then they also give you references now, it's like based on your afternoon portion. So I think it was around 16 geotech references, and I definitely could have spent more time getting to know them, but I got to know the ones that I really needed that had, equations and quick references. But I think that would be my biggest advice to anyone, is just really make sure that you know your references back and forth.
All right. So a couple of really, really, really great points there. I think one of them being this whole idea around time. And, I took the exam a long time ago, and we were able to bring as many books as we wanted to. And I've been saying this even on some of our videos, that for me, when I did that, I kind of bought the civil engineering, kind of the reference manual. I kind of studied with that like 95% of the time. Right. And I'm like really marked it up, because my worry, to your point, was if I spend so much time going through a million books, it's going to detract from me actually being able to do the problems. But I think that the NCEES kind of squashed that, right, by just giving you the manual, as to your point, and saying, here it is, study this, and we'll have it on the exam. So I think it can really be a time saver. But I do think that Megan's point about the codes is really important. We actually did a video on this as well, that depending on your discipline, geotech, structural, there are different codes that they will make available to you, I believe, right, in that like PDF database or the dashboard that you have on the exam, that you can open up and go through those codes and do a search and find things. But it's your responsibility, of course, to be familiar with those codes ahead of the exam. So again, you're not trying to find too many things. You're just more knowing you have to go to this code and look up this thing, and then you can find it.
Yeah,
and that's
I'm
critical.
a very visual learner. So I even had, like, just the whole time, I just, made a sheet right next to me that I had oh, I know if I have to do deep foundations, it's in this. And if I have a shallow foundations question, it's most likely going to be in this. And I think that was a huge time saver, just being able to know how quickly to get to that document and then control F it.
Yeah, and what I like about that too is it's very relevant to your career as an engineer. Like you're going to use those codes to do designs, right? So it's like getting familiar with looking through codes and being familiarizing yourself. It's only going to help you.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a big plus. So take us a little bit through what you remember of kind of the morning portion, which was the general civil, and the afternoon portion, which was of course the geotech for you of the CBT. Just a general, like, how'd you feel about each session? Were there any particular areas that were maybe challenging or more manageable between the morning and the afternoon?
I think the biggest thing, and what a lot of people are saying, and I've heard, is that it's a way more conceptual exam now than it used to be, and meaning conceptual questions that aren't necessarily calculations. So in the morning, everyone had these different percentages where they were saying, oh, my exam was probably around 20% this, whatever, 80% that. In the morning, I felt good about the amount of conceptual and about the amount of mathematical problems. And I left feeling so-so. I really felt like I got through everything. I had enough time to go back and check all my problems, make sure, read them. I didn't get tricked on any of the questions. And I did leave the morning feeling so-so. Like there was only a few questions that I really was unconfident in, but I felt like I got a good enough of them right. And then in the afternoon, I left feeling just completely defeated. I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to take it again. And it was just, it turned out to be okay, but it was so heavily conceptual questions. I think I used my calculator for maybe 3 or 4 questions,
Wow.
which is just kind of way less than I was expecting to. So
That's interesting. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, I always wonder about, someone's initial feelings like post exam, right? Like if you ask them like, how'd you do? I feel like we should go back and pull all of our guests on like how they thought they did and like what the results were. Because, there's a lot going on that day and, the adrenaline's pumping, but, I think sometimes you do like kind of know that you nailed it or not. But I do think your advice there around just being aware that there are a lot of conceptual problems and trying to practice as many of those as you can ahead of time can be beneficial just to get you in that mindset and get you into that routine for when you do get into the exam, because that's important. So let's go back a little bit and talk about your study schedule, your study routine. It's pretty impressive that you dedicated such a significant amount of time to studying. You stopped going to grad school for a semester. Talk a little bit more again about, the structure of your study schedule, and if there was any specific strategies or routines that maybe you did to keep you really focused on a day-to-day basis with everything else going on in life.
Sure. I think a little bit I was hung up on everyone has this number of, or a lot of people I've heard have a number of 200 hours is like the magical number that you have to study. Mm-hmm. And so the review course that I signed up for was 96 hours, pretty much. Give or take a few hours here or there. So I kind of planned around that. As far as when I was scheduling my exam and when the review class was. So what I did is I had the review class for 8 weeks straight, for 3 to 3.5 hours a night, Monday through Thursday. And then I took Fridays off, and then Saturday and Sunday, I pretty much spent all day studying, practice exams, quizzes, different stuff like that. And then I gave myself about 3 weeks after the exam to have 2 really good weekends of studying. And I kind of gave myself weeknights off at that point. And then 1 good weekend right before, because I think I took my exam on a Monday, just of rest and, getting my brain back in it. A big thing that worked for me was I came into my office, or through the review classes, I stayed in my office. And it stunk to stay until 10 p.m., but I just felt like that's where I was going to get the most focus, because the few times I did do the course from home, I was falling asleep. I was, couch. I was trying to make dinner at the same time, and I just wasn't giving it my all. And so I even came in on weekends sometimes too, to just kind of knock out studying with the least amount of distractions.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, because I feel like in the world we live in, there's a lot of distractions. And so you really have to be very, dedicated to what you're doing in terms of, setting yourself in the right position and atmosphere to succeed, if you will, which it sounds like you did by staying at work, which again is not easy to do. And I like the idea of like what you said about 200 hours, just because I think that we get that question a lot from people, like, how long should I study? Or like, how many months ahead should I study? And I think if you're thinking about it in terms of hours, like 200 hours, you can kind of plan out, like, if I have X hours a week and it's going to take 200 hours, I need 3 months or 4 months or whatever the case may be. I'm wondering too, like for you, like as you got closer to the exam, did you try to do more of like, timing yourself and putting yourself in like a position like you're in the exam?
Yeah. So when I was taking the review classes, I was pretty much just covering the material that I learned in the review class to make sure I thoroughly understood it. But then once the review class was over, I tried a lot of timed exams. So I'd sit there. I only sat for one kind of mimic 8-hour exam, but I definitely did a lot of, all right, let's do the 4 hours for the morning portion and let's sit for the 4 hours of the afternoon portion. And I did that a bunch of times and just kind of scored myself and compared myself to what a lot of people on the internet were saying they were doing and things like that. But yeah, definitely towards the end, I was doing quizzes and tests, which I think was really beneficial for time management and also just having the review, I mean, the references up next to me and really mimicking how the exam was going to be.
Yeah, because for me, your biggest kind of challenge with the exam is time, right? Not necessarily your knowledge. And I think that failure to time yourself when you're practicing the problems just makes it much more difficult because then you show up to the exam and you're not used to that kind of an atmosphere where it's a little more tense, a little more pressure. So I definitely think that's important. Megan, how about, study partners or study groups? Was there anyone that you studied with or you were able to work with a little bit to help with collaboration through the process?
Yeah, one of my really good friends took the exam a few weeks after me. No, a few days after me. I think it was the next week. And he works at the same company. So we really spent a lot of time either after work or on the weekends reviewing things, swapping materials. He would ask me morning geotech questions, and I was able to ask him afternoon questions and morning questions from his discipline. And I think it was just mostly just having someone to go through it with, kind of emotionally, I think was a big deal. Someone who knows that you're canceling all your plans and it's harder to see your family and things like that. So I think emotionally, it was kind of a bigger thing to have someone going through the same thing, but it was also great to share resources. I didn't really have any study groups and things like that, but my company has a good program kind of where there's, people who you recently passed that you can reach out to and things like that. And they kind of run little info sessions every now and again for people going through the process.
That's great. And let's talk about that a little bit because, you're with Colliers Engineering and Design, and they were very supportive of, helping reimburse for the study course and, talk a little bit about how their support maybe played a role in your exam prep and how it impacted your experience through this process.
Yeah. I think right off the bat, you're kind of alarmed maybe by the price of all of these things. The study course, signing up for the exam, it's like, oh, do I want to push it or do I want to keep the whatever? I think it's like $350 they already spent to take the exam. So my company was really great in just kind of outlining everything that you needed to do. You kind of tell them which course you want to take. I think we have a partnership with one certain review course. And, they really take care of it for you. You tell them, oh, I want weeknights or whatever. And, you kind of shop with them for what you want to take. And they give you a day off. You have an excused absence on the day you take the exam, and just a lot of really great things to support your licensure.
Yeah, and I think that matters a lot because it is a very rigorous process, as you've heard Megan talking about. So anything that someone can help you with, helping you get into a course, providing some, like you said, there's maybe some groups within the office or people that took the exam recently that you can reach out to. Getting that day off is nice and just takes a little bit of stress off of, that individual who's going through this very rigorous process in your career. So I think it's a great thing that your company does it. And I know that other companies do it. And I would highly recommend that if your company doesn't do it, maybe it's something you could talk to them about as adding on a benefit, because I think it's a really, really beneficial thing in helping professionals get licensed. So the last question that I want to ask you is, a big thing in the engineering field is field experience, right? Getting out there, getting onto sites. It's a very valuable thing in one's career. But talk about how some of that experience may contribute to your performance actually in the PE exam, whether it was the geotech section or, whatever, some of the disciplines, were there any, did that relate or translate in any way for you?
Yeah, I think it definitely did. Especially with geotech, my geotech and construction experience, like just an example of, knowing what machines to use if you're compacting sands versus clays, which I kind of found that the other people I was studying with, it wasn't something that came naturally to them, if they're a transportation engineer or if they're a water resources engineer. And I just think that field experience and, any kind of experience that we have really played a big part. And I think that's kind of what I struggled with when I took it, with only 2.5 years experience versus almost 5 years experience sitting for the exam. It's just kind of the things you come up with, you're working with other departments. Like there's certain water resources questions and things like that I haven't seen since college, even if I saw it then. But I mean, some things have come up since then. And you really work with other departments. So I think, yeah, the more experience you have, it's obviously going to the better.
Yeah. And so I just want to recap a couple of things because we got a lot of good stuff here from Megan. One of them, I think, going back to what Megan just said and back to what you said earlier, Megan, is in some states, they've kind of decoupled the two exams from the experience so that theoretically some people could take their FE exam and then they could take the PE exam soon after and then go and do their experience after that. But however, that may not be the best approach because sometimes your experience in the field, your experience as a design engineer will greatly contribute to your ability to be successful on the exam. So I think just be wary of that if you're trying to accelerate the process because, it just might make the process easier if you're getting that work experience ahead of the exam. The other thing that I just wanted to mention as well is, adapting your study habits as you need to, right? That was a big thing for Megan. She didn't pass the first time around. Then she made changes. She made adjustments. She took a semester off of school actually and kind of sacrificed that a bit and really plugged into studying because, she wanted to ramp up and thought it was important to get that license. And the last thing that I'm going to say is because I know that our conversation may have scared some of you out there just because it's a lot of work, right? Like you heard all the stuff that Megan kind of had to go through over this series of months to be able to pass the exam. But the one thing that I'll say, and I'm sure, Megan would agree, is that it's really a life and career changing milestone to get that license. You become a professional, a licensed engineer, and nobody could ever take that away from you. And I would imagine, Megan, that, even though you sacrificed a lot of stuff, it was worth it in the long run.
100%. Yeah. Definitely worth it. It's going to take me places in my career, once I actually get the license. It's very, very valuable and worth all the time.
Right. I mean, you're not always thinking that way when you're going through it, but it's worth it. You just have to you have to see. And that's why we like to do these interviews because you can kind of talk and hear from people that went through it and were successful and how they look back on it now saying, it was probably one of the best things I did in my career. So once again, Megan Nugent. Megan is EIT, soon to be PE. She's going to get that license any day now. She's a project engineer for geotechnical services at Colliers Engineering and Design. And Megan, thank you so much for just sharing some advice from your experience. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anthony.
I hope you found this week's video helpful. In upcoming videos, I will solve some more PE exam practice problems and answer other questions from our subscribers. Pass the PE exam videos will be published weekly, so please be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss something that could make a substantial difference in your exam result and your career for the long term. And please ask questions and leave comments below this video and I will read them and I will respond to you. Let me know if there's a specific topic you want me to cover or a specific question you need answered. Pass the PE exam will have you covered. I'll see you next week on Pass the PE exam.